Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about the structure of the United States government. Of course, we have the Constitution that basically spells out the layout of how the government is supposed to function institutionally. Okay, let's start with a little vocabulary word. A term. A term is a time period a person serves in political office. In the United States, we have multiple institutions with different types of terms. Let's start with the legislative branch of the United States government. This is the institution that actually makes laws. That is the United States Congress. The United States Congress is made up of the upper house, the United States Senate, and the lower house, the U.S. House of Representatives. Both of these houses of Congress are elected directly by the people. A senator serves a 6-year term. The representative in the House serves a 2-year term. Now, there are 100 senators apportioned to two per state, meaning they're distributed two per state. This satisfies small states, allowing them to have an equal voice within the lawmaking body. There are 435 representatives in the House of Representatives. It's apportioned, distributed by state population. The more states populated, the more seats you get in the U.S. House of Representatives. California has the most with 52. Okay. Now, just for fun fact, all the top four members, other than the president, obviously, of the presidential line of succession are actually in the United States Congress. The vice president of the United States is also the president of the Senate. The Speaker of the House is third in line, and the president pro tempore is the fourth in line. Not that that's necessary, but it's kind of like the importance of the U.S. Congress, even to the presidential line of succession. Speaking of presidents, we have had 46 presidents. A whole executive branch not only contains the president, but all of these people that are heads of agencies within the United States government and the vice president. The president is indirectly elected by the people through a process called the Electoral College. The president's number two is usually considered the vice president. The vice president only has two roles. Role number one, to take over if a president dies. Rule number two, to break a tie in the Senate. Remember, the Senate has 100 members, 50-50 tie, and the president's vice president actually becomes the tie-breaking vote. All these people are known together as the cabinet. The cabinet are all of the formal, very close advisors of the president. Also works the same in terms of cabinets also exist in a parliamentary system, except they work for the chief executive there, which is the prime minister. Let's talk some US presidents and how they are known. In recent history, Ronald Reagan was a Republican, extremely popular, known for defeating the Soviet Union during the 1980s, really kind of projected American power. He eventually was termed out. Presidents can serve 2 terms of 4 years each. George W. Bush was also very popular due to Operation Desert Storm, but he raised taxes during a time of a minor recession after the Cold War, and therefore he was voted out of office. Bill Clinton was also very popular. He was impeached and acquitted due to a perjury allegation regarding sex with an intern in the White House. He was eventually termed out. George W. Bush was unpopular primarily because of the Iraq War, some of the issues of the war on terror, and his response to Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. He was termed out. Barack Obama, he was popular overall, but a very polarizing figure. He was very popular for his passage of Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, and kind of his hip, cool image. He was unpopular due to his kind of stagnated foreign policy, and he did a significant expansion of presidential power, his use of executive orders and allowing the presidency to do more than the other two branches. He also termed out. Donald Trump was extremely unpopular, mainly due to his response to the Black Lives Matter movement, the abuse of presidential power, some of his anti-democratic statements, breaking the normal constitutional norms, transfer peaceful of power, the January 6th coup attempt. He was impeached and acquitted twice and lost in the 2020 election to the current Democratic president, Joe Biden. Joe Biden is is very unpopular as well, mainly due to his questions about his cognitive function and his overall age. This is how the president is elected, through a process known as the Electoral College. Now, the question that came out in the Constitutional Convention is, we do not want any kind of king, we need a president. And this, how the president was chosen, was established in the 12th Amendment of the Constitution. It created an electoral college, which is not a building, it's a system. It's not a college, it's a system of how you elect the president. And basically, it keeps a check and balance on the people's vote, but still keeps a democracy in principle. Okay. So what happens is, the Electoral College is put into place because a direct national election actually does have a greater ability to have problems with things like fraud. So instead of a huge national election, every state holds an election on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November every 4 years. This is the presidential election. So the states actually hold the elections. This is the electoral map. This is the only map that matters on election day. There are 538 electoral votes out here. This represents all the seats in Congress, 100 plus 435, plus 3 seats for the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. Now, on election night, all you care about is the numbers that add up to 270. Whichever candidate reaches 270 of these electoral votes will end up the winner of the presidential election. And again, we have states that traditionally vote red, Republican, and blue, Democrat. And then you have the swing states that could go either way. This was the 2000 actual election. Notice down here that Al Gore actually beat George Bush by 500,000 votes. It is totally irrelevant. The only thing that matters is you actually have to win each state to get the full electoral votes from those states, and it has to total 270. This was the 2020 overall election, and what we saw here as the swing states and the red and blue states. So you had Georgia, North Carolina, Virginia, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, 1 electoral vote out of Maine, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, and Arizona. And of course, eventually, Joe Biden got more electoral votes for a total of 270. Okay. Now, the Electoral College, remember, is state to state. Each elector votes for 1 ballot. And in the middle of December, those electors go to the state capitals and cast their official ballot for president. And then Congress certifies the vote in the United States Senate and at a joint session of Congress on January the 6th. This is why the rioters attempted to stop the certification. It is entirely symbolic, so it doesn't matter what happens. Once the vote, you know who's going to be president basically when the Electoral College casts all its votes. You usually know who's going to be president really when the races are called on election night. The last branch of government is the United States court system. You have trial courts, which are called district courts. You have U.S. Court of Appeals and 1 U.S. Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is not, all these federal judges are nominated by the president and approved by the Senate, and they all serve for life, which means the only way you can get removed from the court is by death, retirement, or impeachment. Also, there are only 9 justices on the Supreme Court. There is no jury. And overall, it usually, if you start a case at the district courts to go all the way through the system, it takes 5 to 6 years to actually get up through the Supreme Court and get taken care of. Okay? Remember, there are only 9 judges on that court. Overall political parties, there's a bunch of political parties in the United States, but the 2 primary ones are the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. We have a political spectrum here that is right and left. Usually left are seen as more liberal. This is political attitude, not political ideology, which we'll kind of talk about, because liberalism usually means free, not in this context, okay? Left, liberal; right, more conservative. In the political parties, Democrats and Republicans are moderate left and right. Peace and freedom and green are more progressive, so more farther left. Libertarian's kind of off in its own. It's not really as right. It's kind of a shoot off an offshoot, excuse me, and the American Independent Party, which is not an independent party. It's also known as the Reform Party or the Constitutionalist Party. That is very far right. What is the difference between a liberal and a conservative in America? Liberals are more quick for the government to intervene. They want faster change, more government involvement in people's lives, and that the government's primary job is to create equality. Conservatives usually see less government intervention in people's lives. This is traditional conservatives. That kind of is changing right now. Slower paces of change and evolution. That the government's primary job is actually to protect individual liberties and freedom. And often these conflict with each other. Most Americans are somewhere in the middle. Um, you have these new kind of groups that have pulled a lot of the party farther left and farther right. That is the Progressive and America, Make America Again Great Again movement. Um, if we get super radical on the left or right, you get socialists or communists versus nationalists and fascists. Are there these in the United States? Yeah, there are. They're actually pretty rare. Again, most Americans are very in the middle moderate. Most radical organizations have a similar ideology that the government must be overwhelming, that there must be a moral superiority that overrules any kind of constitutional idea. And most radical movements create an erosion of democratic ideals. And so you're getting that a little bit now in the progressive and MAGA movements that pull farther to at the extremes. Um, Again, most Americans don't want overwhelming government over on top of their lives, don't believe that a moral superiority of either the right or left should overrule constitutional ideals, and most Americans do believe in strong democratic ideals.